Hey free-to-play gang, welcome back to another video. This is probably going to be a really quick one. So recently Bravel sent me a list of all the top 64 players in Knockout and their defenses as well. So these are all the different aspects that everyone has been using, but I did a tallying on my own and I realized that he's actually missing like 11 different aspects for some reason. Regardless, this does provide us with some useful information, especially if you are a free-to-play player thinking of trying to climb Knockout, because for the most part Knockout is active in a sense that you need to know who you're attacking, but yet at the same time you can play defensively to earn some points so that you can fare a little bit better in Knockout. And it is very important that you do well, or at least try your best to do well in Knockout, because it does come with really good rewards. Now the thing is, given the spread over here, I will just I don't know, maybe give you guys a few moments to take a look at whatever that is being used over here. As you can see, a lot of the aspects being used are obviously very high in the reso rating, right? So they are like mostly R2 and above. Now, with that said, is it necessarily true that you will need all these high reso aspects in order to be top 60? Yes, obviously you need them because of the extra stats, because of the extra reso buffs and all that. But does that mean that you need all of them to be at high reso in order to be like top 1%? I don't think so. I think in the top 1%, most players that I have seen in the top 1% do not have very high resos at all. Maybe some of them have R2, some of them have R3 or R4. Most of them have like R0 or R1 aspects, at least based on whatever they have seen. So the thing is, it is still possible for you to free-to-play achieve like maybe top 5%, which should give you, if I remember correctly, I think it was like top 7%, should give you like certain legendary ability on ripples. Regardless, I've broken this down into some important information that I care about, which is the total number of wind, flow, and inferno aspects being used in the previous Knockout. Now, what we can see is that the total number of wind aspects being used is actually the least amongst the other elements, even including shimmers as well. This is a huge surprise. Now, the reason why Gaius used to be a little bit iffy in PvP is because there was just way too many wind type aspects being used, and those wind type aspects were also very tanky in nature. So that made it a little bit more complicated for Gaius to participate, because you have heights, you have trickies, you have Ahmed, Sienna, a lot of different wind type aspects who are built tanky. So Gaius is not able to pull his weight so easily in this regard. But the thing is, now with this massive meta change, right, the number of wind type aspects being used in defenses are extremely low, which means that Gaius is now a very valid option if you want to use him as your sole DPS aspect. It's completely possible right now. Alright, so anyway, I went ahead to design two teams for you guys, which is I would say that it's actually completely free to play. The first layer is completely free to play, which is essentially the first team over here, the second team over here, completely free to play. You do not need reso investments at all. But the thing is, if you have some of these other aspects that may require certain investment, like maybe Cecilia, for example, is not something that you can get for free. If you do have her, then these would be valid options for you to use as well. So let me explain, okay? So for your first team, it is better for you to run tanky rather than to run speedy. And the reason why I'm saying this is because for most of you guys out there, you are probably not going to be able to compete in speed. Maybe because you lack an R2 Ethan, or maybe you just do not have like 350 plus speed on your fastest aspect, for example. Then if that's the case, it's going to be very hard for you to compete, especially if you're putting your fastest team in front, exposing yourself super easily to other teams who are faster or who have Ethan R2 as well. So as a general rule of thumb, it is safer to put your slower team in front, which is your tanky team. So this is what your first team is going to look like. All these aspects can be R0 except for Everett, who should be R6. He's essentially free. So R0 Ahmed, good enough, he's able to heal. He will not be able to push your speed, but I think it's honestly completely fine. Jinyuya at R0 is okay. If she's at R1, it's even better. Anesidora is just here for extra DPS, some stuns, and of course, the speed up buff as well. And Gabriel is just here for immunity. Very simple stuff. This team is tanky. It should be able to live past like Gaius, Cleaves and all that. Because for the most part, you have Everett, you have Ahmed, you have Gabriel. It's going to be very tanky against enemy Gaius, which is great because now Gaius is going to be more used. But I'll say that this team is not complete. Let me explain. Now, the thing is, Tevor is being used more often nowadays because he is definitely a lot more buffed than in the past. But the thing is, Tevor's AI kind of sucks right now because he only targets enemies with the red debuff. And as such, we can actually abuse this mechanic to use a Cecilia here just to confuse the enemy and make them think that, okay, they can use a Tevor, right? So what Cecilia is here for is just to bait Tevors, and you do not want to put Cecilia up in front. You want to put her far behind so that you still have the HP lead even though it's less powerful, but you protect Cecilia from Brewsters, for example. But most importantly, the reason why you want to use Cecilia is because you want to use another Esper, let's say your Everett, with the highest attack in this entire setup, so that Tevor's AI will only focus Everett in this case, but Everett already reduces the incoming crit that he receives by 30%. So assuming that the enemy Tevor is less than R2, he is going to target Everett all the time, and he's going to prioritize attacking Everett, and he's going to have a 30% crit reduction, which will severely reduce their odds of winning. So this is gonna be like a bait, so to speak. But the thing is, using a Cecilia here is also really good because let's say, you know, if you replace your Gabrielle with a Cecilia, right? Enemies are likely to use a Gaius against you, but if they use a Gaius against you, you're gonna revive afterwards. And this is how you stop a Cleave instantly by using a Cecilia, which is awesome. So this is the mechanic over here. Now, the next two Espers here, we have Elliot and we also have Intisa. These two Espers, Elliot can be at R0, Intisa should be at R2. The reason why these two Espers are here is because these two Espers are really good counters against Feng Nuxi. Now the reason is this, for Elliot, if he gets cooldown reset by Feng Nuxi, he will still get hit a couple of times before he takes a turn, right? Because the enemies are just much faster than you. As such, he's actually going to get his cooldown reduced on his third skill eventually, so he's able to use his third skill the moment his turn comes around again, which is why he's a really good counter against Feng Nuxi. And the same is kind of true for Intisa as well. So the thing is, if your Intisa is at R2 and above, she starts off with the stealth, and if she gets cooldown increased with her stealth buff removed, she will use her first skill, which will then throw her right back into her third skill again for more stealth and more DPS and like a lot of good stuff, which is essentially going to counter Cleave in most situations. Now Sally over here, you do not really want to use her sub R6, but the thing is, if you have her at sub R6, she is still viable in a sense that you can run her as the lead for resistance. So your entire team has more resistance, which means that enemy Ashley, enemy Brewster, all these, you don't really need to worry too much about them, especially if you're up against a Brewster, because if the enemy lands AoE attacks, the Brewster will attack your first Esper, which is going to be your Sally lead, and she is a flow type, so she's instantly going to bounce off any of Brewster's attacks, but of course at the same time, the resistance will protect your Sally from any defense breaks as well. So Sally at the leader spot is actually a really sneaky move, and of course another way for you to counter a speed Cleave, which is probably your weakness, is to use a Genie. Now Genie, whenever she gets hit, she reflects damage and she heals herself, so she's really good against cleaving comps, except if you're up against a Gaius. But yeah, that's basically it for the first team. This is how your tanky defense is supposed to work for a free-to-play player. Now let's move on to the second team. So your first team is going to be your tanky defense. Your second team should be a speedy Cleave comp. Now the reason why your second team should be a speedy Cleave comp is because, let's say if your first team survives the enemy's first team, which is, like, let's say the enemy used a tanky comp against you and you want their tanky comp, your team is going to get cleaved by their speedy comp afterwards. And if your tanky comp gets cleaved by a speed Cleave comp afterwards, they are going to be a lot weaker and you are going to go in with hopefully more speed, but it doesn't matter even if you're slow because they have already used all of their skills, so their skills are on cooldown, which means they're going to waste their turn and your team is just going to counter Cleave afterwards, which is why running a very fast second team is quite important. But also secondly, it's harder for the enemies to predict your speed when they cannot effectively test it. But secondly, it's also very difficult for the enemies to predict what's going to happen, so they would need to risk their speed Cleave comp losing to your tanky comp before trying to find out whether can they even outspeed your speed Cleave in the first place. So there's extra layers of complexity to your defense setup. So that's why I really like this setup, like slow and then speedy. That's generally how I play. So this is a free-to-play setup. Tia R0, that's all you need. Clara R0 also kind of like good enough, at least for her role over here. And Abigail at least R0, yeah, that's it. Okay, so the way this works is, I've actually done a showcase before, so Clara is supposed to be the fastest Esper here. She's going to push your AP, give immunity at the start, and hopefully you had a shield set somewhere, like maybe on your TF for example. Then Abigail is going to get her AP pushed, she's going to take the next turn, she's going to push Tia up to 100%, and Tia is going to do an AP swap with the enemy using her third skill. And in this case, that's actually going to push Abigail up, hopefully close to like maybe the next turn again. And as such, Abigail is able to use her skill again, so now your team has immunity, attack buff, absorb buff, shield buff, defense buff, and hopefully another shield buff if you had it at the start of the fight. So like I said, on TF for example. So that's 6 buffs, and then Alice is going to come in with the create up buff and the speed buff for a total of 8 buffs with an extra buff extension for, you know, just like 2 to 3 turns of every single buff. So you already have 8 buffs on your Chloe, and this is how Chloe is going to cleave afterwards. So this is the Chloe cleave comp. And because we had Alice here extending her buffs, and Chloe can also extend buffs on her second skill, this would hopefully allow her to cycle a little bit better, so she's able to do more damage even if she doesn't cleave at the start. So yeah, this is how it's supposed to work. But let's say you do not want to run the Chloe Cleave comp, there are other alternatives for you as well. Instead of running Alice and Chloe, you can consider running Xuan and Brewster. So this is going to be quite similar to my current setup in Point War. But of course I run an R6 Brewster, which is completely different. So the way this team is supposed to work is that we have some AoE damage. We have AoE damage from Xuan, we have AoE damage from Tia, for a total of 3 AoE damage, which is the number of reload attack stacks that Brewster has at the start. So assuming that Champagne uses the third skill, gives the attack up buff, and that triggers the first assist from Brewster, Tia will take the next turn, swap Champagne back up again, but by Tia using her third skill this way, that will allow Brewster to support again for his second assist. And then because we AP swapped Champagne back to the top again, then Champagne is going to use her second skill for another AoE attack, which will allow Brewster to assist for the third and final time, which at this point, Brewster should have pretty much close to 100% AP, if not 100% AP. And if that's the case, Brewster is just going to use his third skill afterwards, boom, for more extra DPS and 5 more reload attack stacks. Now, the other way that you can manipulate your second team here is to replace Abigail, Alice, and Chloe for Dahlia, Ashley, and Gaius. This is like a very typical Gaius Cleave comp. And yeah, enough said. So these are the 2 comps over here, which I would highly recommend to you guys if you're free to play. These 2 comps are very powerful, they're very strong, they're very effective, and they pretty much cover every single ground. You just need to make sure that your stats are good, because I think that's probably like the main thing. Resonance-wise, these Espers don't really need those resonances that urgently. I mean, of course, the extra resonance is going to help, but for the most part, this is as free to play and as powerful as it gets for the time being. But yeah, anyway, leave your comments down below if you have any other questions. Feel free to ask me anything at all. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed today's content. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up. It really helps the channel, and subscribe for more Dislyte content. Now, that's it. This has been Free to Play, and as always, I will see you in the next video.